Most fans believe speed in Formula One comes from stability. A car that looks calm, planted, and perfectly under control is assumed to be the fastest possible version of that machine. So when a car looks nervous, when the rear steps out mid-corner, or the driver constantly corrects the steering, the natural assumption is simple. Something is wrong. The driver is overdriving, time is being lost. But that assumption is exactly why Max Verstappen often looks fastest when his car looks worse. Because what most people interpret as instability is actually where Verstappen is most comfortable, and more importantly, where lap time is truly found. This misunderstanding starts with how fans perceive sliding. Watching a car move sideways through a corner feels inefficient. It looks messy, uncontrolled, even desperate. But at the highest level of motorsport, sliding does not automatically mean slower. In fact, the fastest lap is rarely driven with the car perfectly settled. Real performance lives in a narrow grey zone that most drivers only touch briefly. Verstappen doesn't just touch that zone, he lives inside it. The physics behind this are rarely explained clearly. A Formula One tyre produces maximum lateral grip not when it is perfectly planted, but when it operates at an optimal slip angle. For modern F1 tyres, that window sits roughly between 6 and 8 degrees. In that moment, the tyre is neither fully gripping nor fully sliding. The rubber deforms, the sidewall loads up, and the contact patch works at its absolute limit. That is where rotation happens without traction loss. Most drivers enter that window cautiously and leave it quickly. Verstappen stays there longer than anyone else on the grid, and that is where the difference is made. This is why Verstappen has always preferred oversteer. He has never hidden it. Understeer, in his words, is slow. If the front doesn't bite, the car refuses to rotate. If the car refuses to rotate, the driver waits. And waiting costs lap time. Verstappen wants a car that responds instantly, one that rotates aggressively on corner entry and feels alive beneath him. That preference has shaped the entire development philosophy at Red Bull Racing. The team has openly admitted that Verstappen demands more front axle response than almost any driver they have worked with before. A sharp nose, a nervous rear, and very little margin for error. That approach unlocks performance, but it comes with a cost. The same setup that allows Verstappen to extract lap time creates a nightmare for his teammates. Over the years, every driver who has shared a garage with him has described the car in similar terms: edgy, unforgiving, difficult to trust. Alex Albon once compared it to turning mouse sensitivity all the way to maximum, where even the smallest movement sends the cursor flying across the screen. That analogy explains everything. At high sensitivity, mistakes are punished instantly, and confidence disappears. But for Verstappen, that sensitivity isn't danger, it's information. The statistics reflect this reality brutally. Across multiple seasons and multiple teammates, Verstappen has dominated qualifying battles, not because he takes more risks, but because he extracts speed from a setup others can barely survive. The car isn't designed to be comfortable, it's designed to be fast. And only one driver consistently accesses that speed. What makes this even more remarkable is that this ability didn't appear out of nowhere. Verstappen wasn't simply born comfortable with chaos, he was trained for it. And that story begins long before Formula One, long before junior formulas, long before global attention. It begins in karting, under a program that bordered on extreme. Max Verstappen first sat in a kart at 4.5 years old, but trophies were never the focus. The methods mattered more than the results. His father, Jos Verstappen, built a training environment designed to eliminate comfort entirely. Winter training camps in Italy were brutal. Cold rain, freezing temperatures, miserable conditions. When rain arrived, most drivers stopped. One kart stayed on track. Max's. As long as his fingers weren't completely frozen, he kept driving. When he said he couldn't feel his hands, he was given minutes, not hours, before being sent back out. Grip was inconsistent. The surface was unpredictable. Mistakes were inevitable. And that was the point. The goal wasn't smoothness, it was adaptation. Learning to operate when conditions refused to cooperate. That environment forced Max to develop sensitivity, not just bravery. He wasn't learning how to avoid sliding, he was learning how to control it. Another training method explains Verstappen's modern superpower better than any statistic. Jos would secretly change something on the kart. Chassis setup, weight distribution, balance. Then send Max out for 2 laps. That was all he got. His task was to identify exactly what had changed. Not vaguely, not generally, precisely. That is why today Verstappen can exit the garage in Formula 1, complete a single lap, and immediately ask engineers if something changed on a specific corner of the car. And more often than not, he's right. Sometimes Jos went even further, adding lead weight to the kart without telling him. Equipment was never allowed to become an excuse. If Max matched lap times despite the handicap, the session was considered successful. This mindset carried into his professional career. Conditions don't define his performance. He adapts to them. This background explains why Verstappen's driving style produces lap time when others struggle. To understand why, you need to understand the traction circle. Every tyre has a finite amount of grip, and that grip must be shared between braking, cornering, and acceleration. Most drivers prioritise stability, keeping the rear planted and relying heavily on the front tyres to handle direction changes. It's safe, predictable, and slower. Verstappen takes the opposite approach. He uses trail braking aggressively to load the front axle, forcing the car to rotate earlier in the corner. Because the nose points toward the exit sooner, he can straighten the steering wheel earlier. And the moment the wheel straightens, throttle application begins. Earlier throttle means earlier acceleration, and that is where lap time is created. The sliding isn't wasted movement, it's controlled rotation. This style has been described by analysts as manipulative rather than reactive. Verstappen doesn't fight the car, he stays on top of it. His steering inputs are smooth, his pedal traces are clean. Even when the car looks wild on television, it is rarely out of control. The difference between perception and reality is enormous. Certain races made this reputation impossible to ignore. Brazil 2016 remains one of the most famous wet weather drives in Formula 1 history. Dropped deep in the field in torrential rain, Verstappen carved through the pack as if operating under different physical laws. Drivers ahead tiptoed, Verstappen attacked. Even rivals admitted it felt like physics were being redefined. Years later, Brazil 2024 was arguably even more impressive. Starting 17th after penalties, Verstappen didn't just recover, he dominated. He gained positions relentlessly, set fastest laps throughout the race, and won by a massive margin. It wasn't desperation, it was execution, clinical control in the worst possible conditions. Imola 2021 delivered another example, where a perfect launch in wet conditions allowed him to pass multiple cars immediately and disappear. These performances weren't anomalies, they were confirmations of a skill set built over decades. That doesn't mean Verstappen is invincible. When the setup doesn't align with his style, the same sharp edge that creates speed can turn against him. Low downforce choices, unexpected grip loss, Red Bull built their entire car development philosophy around Verstappen's preference for a sharp, responsive front end that most teammates find undrivable. His childhood training forged the mental and physical capacity to operate there. And now Formula 1 is moving toward a future where those skills may become essential rather than exceptional. As lighter cars with more torque and less downforce arrive, the sport may finally reward the kind of driving most fans once misunderstood. The question isn't whether low-grip skill matters for the future of Formula 1. The real question is whether the rest of the grid can learn what Max Verstappen has known since he was 7 years old.